Hi, everyone, and welcome back to another episode of the CFA podcast here at AFI FEST. We are always joined by exciting filmmakers, and we are very excited to be here. I'm with Haley Royal, my co-host and co-founder. I'm Indiana Underhill, also a co-founder of CFA. Joining us on the couch, wonderful outfit on, statement piece of the century, is Laura Karpman, the composer of American Fiction. Welcome.
Hi everybody. Thanks for having me.
you?
I'm great.
And now I already feel a little closer to you because your mother was from Toronto, and I'm
Yes,
from Toronto.
yes.
And so anything related to Canada, I'm already excited about.
Fellow Canadians.
Yes, exactly. So we are very excited to have you here before the premiere at AFI Fest at 3 p.m. in about an hour, correct?
Mm-hmm.
Now, Laura, I want to get into the nitty-gritty of kind of how scores were made, how you were brought onto the project. Now, the director of this project is Cord Jefferson.
Right.
Had you worked together before? How were you brought onto the project?
No, it was actually a very unusual way. And that is, I submitted a reel for the project. And that sounds like, well, what is so unusual about that? Generally, at my stage,
Totally.
you know, you'll be, somebody will call you, you'll know somebody who knows somebody. But my agent called me, told me about the project. I read the book. I went nuts for the book. It was one of the best things that I had read in a long time. So I said, yeah, let's put together a reel. But Nia DaCosta, who is the director of The Marvels, is friends with Cord Jefferson. And at that point, I'd worked with Nia for about a year, and we were finishing up recording on The Marvels, and I think that she recommended me as well. So it came from multiple sources, but it was a reel that got me the job.
Now, I'm originally a cinematographer. Haley is originally an actor.
Okay.
We don't get to speak to a lot of composers. And so when
We don't often speak.
Yeah,
No.
I know, right? I'm like, so
We don't like to leave the house.
It's
You know,
a
this is
different
like
language
usual.
we get from you.
No, it's like we're in our little caves and we're happy there.
Yeah. So when you get hired on or brought onto a project, what is the first discussion you have?
Well, I mean, the first thing is you talk about the nature of the music.
Okay.
Every project has its own sort of, temperature, vibe, feeling, and you have to figure that out. Sometimes I think almost about the weight of music in a project. And when you think about, you know, we just mentioned The Marvels, where you've got The Marvels, which is a huge canvas, massive orchestra, can take tons of music, and then you have film like this, which is more delicate. And so you think about those kinds of things. And with this particular film, I think they were looking at a jazz-oriented score because the title character's nickname is Monk, named after the famous Thelonious Monk, great jazz composer and pianist. So, you know, I grew up as a jazz musician as
You
well
went
as
to
a
Juilliard for
yeah,
jazz, right?
I didn't go to Juilliard for jazz. I went for classical music because at that point they didn't have jazz. But what I did do is at night I would play jazz clubs.
Got it.
So there were
Oh
all
my
these like
goodness.
various bars and stuff. So I would play and sing jazz, and so I kind of grew up doing both of them simultaneously. So jazz is a very comfortable language for me.
Wow. And so that's kind of the first discussion you're having. And then when you have that vibe, is it, you know, we don't talk to composers a lot because you're in your own cave.
Right.
Is it the quiet moments you have with yourself where you're starting to pull together pieces of like, maybe we could try this, maybe we try this? Is it prior to them even shooting that you're pulling pieces together, or is it only after you have sort of images or dailies that you can really begin to place things?
It's just all of the above.
Wow.
I mean, here we are talking about two projects simultaneously. Marvels, I wrote themes before shooting.
Yeah.
I read the script because that's kind of the way that particular one went. But this one, I saw a cut. And I think it was probably a director's cut or near to a director's cut. And I came out, and basically with American Fiction, a lot of scores use temporary music. We call it a temp dub. And a temp dub is basically, filmmakers put music against their images to kind of test it. They'll test the vibe of whatever a piece is. Sometimes they'll test the edit to see if it works, because music is this magical thing. Films need it. You don't really know why, but they do. If you've ever, well, you know, you both come from film. Have you ever seen a film without music?
God, only in film school.
Only in film school, and then it kind of stumbles along.
Oh, yeah,
right?
for sure.
So,
Yeah.
I mean, there's some films like Florida Project, which was
Yeah.
very cool, had no music until the very, very end, and when that cue came in, it was just, it was when they finally got to
overwhelming.
Disneyland.
To
It was
Disneyland.
almost overwhelming, right?
Yeah.
But for a film like American Fiction, they had tempt it. And American Fiction is a film that's got a lot of different emotions going on.
Yeah.
You've got a family story that's very emotional. You've got a lot of humor. And so I think a lot of what you think about is, well, how do we use a jazz score, decide where we are going to give the audience permission to laugh? And in a lot of comedies, you really have to navigate that permission to laugh. Like,
That's really interesting.
well, I know, and and every director or producer, whoever the creative people on, have different feelings about when you do that and how you do that. And so, I did another film for Netflix, a popular romantic comedy called Set It Up. So Set It Up really was reactive comedy.
Yeah.
Somebody would do something and you would react to it in a very traditional rom-com kind of way. With this film, it's a very different vibe because you're reacting to I don't know, you want to call them micro, macro aggressions,
Right.
but you're reacting to sort of, let's call them microaggressions, and letting the audience know that they can laugh at
Yeah.
them. So, and yet still doing it within the language of jazz. So I think that was the challenge of this film.
It is a really interesting point about the responsibility of a composer working with the director and the team of
Right.
giving permission to laugh, especially when you're dealing with a lot of genres.
Yeah.
Because I know that this film is categorized as a satirical comedy drama film.
Right.
And so you probably have to be in tune with your collaborators just as much as you have to be in tune with the music or the score that you're putting together.
Well, you do, and part of what happens is you take a first swing at it, and
Yeah.
sometimes things work and sometimes don't. And with this particular film, I took a lot of swings at the first act because really there were. I took one direction the first time, and then they wanted to pull it back and then push it forward, and so really we spent almost all our time really on the first act getting the comedy right, and then the family drama, and really honestly the rest of it was much easier. But getting exactly what they wanted in the first portion of the film was definitely challenging.
How fantastic.
I really want to know, Laura, what is your process of reading a script through the first time? I feel like every filmmaker or craftsperson or anyone involved in film has a way that they love to receive a script. Do you like it to be quiet? Do you like to listen to music inside, outside? What's
do you
your
make
process?
Notes? Yeah, or
What do you
pass
do?
without notes first? Like, yeah.
Well, with scripts, it's funny. I mean, sometimes scripts jump off the page, and sometimes they don't.
Yeah.
Sometimes you have to read it 2 or 3 times to even truly get what's going on, and sometimes you immediately see the movie. I think I do it in pretty much quiet. I don't listen to music because
I know. Can you listen to music?
I can
if
while
you're
you're
thinking
thinking the
composition?
music.
Which is so interesting in its own world. Yeah.
You can't.
Yeah.
And in fact, I don't listen to a lot of music. I do in the car.
Okay.
But at home, I mean, sometimes, but when you're writing a lot of music all the time, really, you want quiet
Yeah.
when you're not,
Yeah.
when you're not doing it. So
Yeah.
reading a script, I'll read it, I mean, it depends on it, but definitely 2 or 3 times and take notes. And
Yes.
often I'll do a quick read through the first time just to get basic plot and story, and then go through looking for, music and how it can really function. But I will say this. There's a big difference between a script and a movie.
Right.
And when it comes to score, there's a really big difference between a script and a movie, because everybody's best intentions and a writer's best intentions of how music should function in a script often don't play out once you get the film going.
Right. Now, it's so interesting to me because hearing about that you don't listen to a lot of music except for in the car.
Right.
Where does a lot of your everyday life inspiration come from? I know for this it was a lot of jazz and you have the
Yeah.
history with it. Where does it come from, or where are you pulling from? Recently, maybe?
Oh my God, it's so funny. Like for this film, my son is a jazz musician. He plays guitar, and I remember at that time there was a concert, and they played a group called Snarky Puppy.
I know Snarky
Right,
Puppy,
well, they played it.
yeah.
Yeah, everybody's cheering in the background. Like the high schoolers played Snarky Puppy, and
Yeah.
I wasn't aware. It's like, wow, this is cool.
Whoa.
This
Yeah,
is
yeah,
like
yeah.
next generation jazz. So I thought, then I went and listened to a lot of Snarky Puppy. I also obviously went back and listened to Monk and tried to figure out, do we want to use the music of Thelonious Monk?
Right.
Or do I want to write something original? And I gave the filmmakers a lot of options. For this one in particular, normally I don't do this. Normally I'll write a theme and present it. But for this particular film, I wrote like 3 different versions. So there's one scene that they really loved the temp, and I did 3 versions to show them different ways that a new
Wow.
cue could work. So once with the music of Monk, once with my own Monk's theme that I wrote inspired by Monk, and then a third, I can't remember what the third was. But, or we were talking about the Marvels. Like
Yeah.
I'm a competitive fencer,
Mhm.
and at my fencing club, they were
Love it.
playing this. I mean, the one guy had great taste, was playing this one track by Herbie Hancock, and there was this flute thing, and that inspired me for something. So sometimes it's like something you catch in the air, which
Yeah.
is why I like to listen to the radio.
Yeah.
Where somebody else is curating. I'm not
Absolutely.
listening to my own stuff.
Right.
But I think when you get to a certain point, you also draw from a deep well inside of you.
Yes.
You draw, I think as a musician, you absorb music in maybe a different way from other people. I don't know. I don't know how anybody else absorbs it, but it's almost like I've got a library in my head. So when I'm thinking about, oh, well, it's Monk. All right, well, let's look at, Ruby My Dear, or let's look at let's look at Mingus, or let's look at stuff that's in that sort of edge of jazz, which I
Yes.
think Monk was kind of the edge of, in that time, bebop and, cool jazz of 50s and 60s.
Wow. Now, I know we have to wrap things up. I have one final question for you. You've won 5 Emmys for your work. You have a huge body of work that the majority of the world has seen.
Oh.
It is extremely impressive. At this point in your career, what do you find difficult about your job? Is there anything you still find difficult?
Yeah, I mean, I wouldn't use the word difficult. I would say every job has challenges,
Yes.
which are remarkable and exciting, and that's what makes this gig so fun. I mean, we talked about regulating the comedy
Yeah.
in this film.
Yes.
That was a challenge. Writing original music that was in the style of Monk, but not Monk, and what that could bring to this film, that was a challenge, So I think every project has its inherent challenges, and honestly, that's
That's the fun of it.
that's what makes it a vibrant career.
Yes.
It's literally a life of learning,
Fantastic.
and that's the best part.
Awesome.
love
I'm
to
so
hear that.
glad we got to sit down with
Oh,
you
me
to chat for
too.
American Fiction. I know you're premiering soon here at AFI Fest. This has been Laura Karpman, the composer of American Fiction, and many of the other of your favorite films and probably scores. Now, this premiered at TIFF on September 8th. It won the People's Choice Award.
It did.
I know on Rotten Tomatoes it already has 95%.
It's a great movie. It's just a great film.
So I'm very excited for it to be a fan favorite
Yeah.
across the world. It
It
comes
will be.
out on December 15th. Everyone go see it. Thank you so much for joining us, Laura.
My pleasure. Thank you
Laura.
so
Awesome.
much.
Thanks, everyone.
Thanks, everyone.
Bye.